You need to stop taking things so personally. That is a whole lot easier said than done. Especially when you wanted to lead the project, but you weren't chosen to do so. You're dealing with criticism at work that is not constructive. You're navigating office politics with a difficult coworker. Or even if you're facing a layoff or you've been passed over for a promotion or a position that you really wanted. Like, how can you take any of those things any other way than personally? Well, after you watch this video, you will know how. Hello friend, and if you are new here, welcome to my channel. For videos on how to navigate workplace issues and elevate your career, click the subscription button and the notification bell if you haven't done so already. I hear it brings good luck. The first step to not taking things personally at work is to realize that you are not your job. Our identities have become so intertwined with work. And if you're like most of my clients, you spend quite a bit of time working, you extract a lot of joy and personal satisfaction from the work that you do. And when we're not socially distancing and you're at a party or a happy hour, what's one of the first questions that people ask you? What do you do? And I mean, sure, your job is part of who you are. I mean, it's what you do for several hours most days of the week, right? But it's not the only thing about you. It doesn't encompass who you are as a human being. The problem is that we've taken those 40 to 50 hours a week that most people are spending at work, and instead of business being business, we've made it personal. There are real risks to entwining your entire identity to who you are at work or even where you work. Recently, there was a New York Times article, and I actually shared this over on my LinkedIn, and the author had been through so much adversity, but she had really associated her identity with the company that she worked for. And when things went sideways and she no longer worked there, her identity went with the job. And sure, that was an extreme case, and hopefully none of you are actually having to deal with that right now. But as someone who has been through job loss, I can tell you my identity was way entwined with my professional life. Even look at a situation where maybe you're in a toxic workplace or you're working with a difficult boss and you're being undermined and undervalued. If you're leaning on your profession and your job to define who you are and extract your self-worth, this isn't gonna feel very good. And really, you are so many things beyond what you do and who you are when you show up at work. You're a friend, you're a family member, you have hobbies. And while a job is a part of who you are, it isn't the entire being of who you are. We need to stop defining ourselves by our work and identifying ourselves by our jobs. That tiny bit of compartmentalization goes a long way, especially when it comes to not taking things so personally at work. Because when you know that you are not your work, it becomes much harder to take those things personally. And if you agree that you are so much more than your job, I want you to pop in the comment, "I am not my job," in the comments down below. And that brings me to the second thing that we really need to dig into when we're thinking about not taking things personally at work. And that is the fact that you are not your actions or defined by what happens to you. You have probably done amazing things at work, and you are probably delighted to brag about it to anyone who will listen. And you should be proud. However, I want to ask you a question that I think most career strategists wouldn't ask. Do those accomplishments move the needle on who you are as a human being? Sometimes the answer is yes, because our personal and professional development so often overlap each other. After all, we are one individual, not completely separate beings, depending on what area of our life we're in. And even when we're facing adversity or obstacles at work, those can actually be elements of great personal growth for us. However, the things that happen to you and maybe even how someone treats you doesn't define who you are. One of the things that I know happens to a lot of you from the conversations that we have in the comments is that you're being overlooked. Your boss or the leadership at your company just doesn't see how awesome you are and how much potential you have. And is there strategies and tactics that you can implement in order to increase your visibility and raise awareness about your potential? Of course. But when you do those things, ultimately, if someone fails to recognize them or acknowledge them, does that person's bias or blind spot actually reflect on you? In my opinion, It doesn't. I'm just gonna say this plainly. If someone is too ignorant to see how awesome you are and how much you are capable of, and they choose to not take advantage of all of the value that you can bring to the table, it's their loss. Especially if they're doing it because they're so wrapped up in their own ego. Their lack of acknowledgement says absolutely nothing about what your potential is and what you're capable of accomplishing at work, given the opportunities. Another way that this shows up at work where we start taking things personally is when we are getting feedback. If you want to be successful at work, one of the most crucial skills that you are going to develop is the ability to accept and assess feedback. One thing I have a problem with is people walking around talking about how all feedback is totally fair and totally valid, and we need to listen to it all. That is absolutely not true. Top performers are able to curate the feedback that they receive, and they're also able to assess how they actually apply it in a way that works for them. And they are not taking constructive criticism that they receive personally. How do they depersonalize the feedback about their performance at their job from who they actually are? Well, there's a couple of strategies that you can easily employ. First, you need to acknowledge that not all feedback is going to be valid. Most feedback that you receive is going to be a matter of opinion. For most of us in our jobs, there's a million different ways to get to the same conclusion. Some might be more efficient, some might be more effective, but there's not always a clear-cut right and wrong answer. Just because someone thinks that their approach is a better way doesn't mean it's a better way, and it especially does not mean that it's a better way for you. Also remember that any feedback that you receive about your performance on your job is simply that, about performance on the job. We are all learning, we are all growing, and the moment that you cease your professional development is the moment that your career is absolutely going to stall, whether you want it to or not. Also, when it comes to things like feedback, criticism, or even difficult situations at work, sometimes those actually have nothing to do with you. You might have an insecure boss, a jealous coworker, or an otherwise toxic person at work who is simply trying to drag you down. The other thing that I think we should always keep in mind is that you never know where someone else is at. They might be having the worst day of their life. And I know that this is really cliche, but it's something that has helped me so much, especially in not taking things personally at work when someone is being difficult. And that is, imagine that something terrible has just happened to them. Even when you think you know someone, you might not actually know what's going on behind the scenes. For example, when my mother passed away, I didn't tell any of my clients, and even a lot of my coworkers didn't know about it. And while we shouldn't take our bad days on someone else, sometimes it just happens. While I'm all for work-life boundaries, we need to stop pretending that we are completely able to leave our stress at the door when we walk into the office or into our home after work. Our brains don't work that way. So maybe your insecure boss is giving you a whole bunch of trouble because they just got in trouble from their boss. Or your passive-aggressive coworker had a major fight with their spouse in the morning and they're just bringing that vibe to work. People like to project things, and sometimes it's even us projecting those things onto other people because of something that's going on in our life, and we're bringing that energy into the office. Or into the Zoom, whichever. So if you're dealing with a difficult coworker or a difficult boss, just keep in mind that their difficultness, is that a word? I don't know. Might have absolutely nothing to do with you. And finally, it's also important to remember that not all feedback is going to be equal. For example, the opinion of your difficult coworker is not going to be on par with your manager who has the opportunity to promote you and is in charge of your performance reviews. Impression management matters much more for some people in the chain of command depending on what your career goals are, and that is something to be aware of as well. Now, I've gotten a lot of feedback over the course of my career, and not all of it was great. But one of the things that helped me make sure that I wasn't taking it personally was this next step. And if you only implement one of the strategies from this video, it absolutely must be this one. And that is increasing your self-awareness as a strategy to take things less personally at work. Let me tell you, nothing makes you more impervious to other people's opinions and possibly slights than knowing exactly who you are and what makes you so awesome. But this is also where I see so many ambitious professionals go all wrong. Put the cart before the horse. A lot of people have a tendency to look outside for validation or even just to figure out what actually makes them stand out. And there's a reason for this. In my opinion, most people derive their confidence externally. So they're looking to the external world to validate them, and that is what makes them feel good and makes them feel confident. And when we're at work, let's face it, other people's opinion matters. But what other people think about you and perceive by you is actually shaped by something else. Your own internal awareness. Self-awareness cannot be established by looking outside of yourself all the time. Sure, it can be a component, but it should not be the primary source. This, my friend, is an inside job. And looking inside of yourself to figure out what your strengths are and even what your weaknesses are is what is going to help you build an incredible amount of self-awareness. And let me tell you, if you do this, you are going to stand out for that fact alone, because this is something that most people do not do. I also know that this isn't easy, and that's exactly why I created my UAQ starter kit. And this is to help you identify your inherent strengths that you bring to the table so that you can amplify them at work. If you want to snag that, it is totally free. I'll leave the link in the description bar down below. Your UAQ, your unique awesomeness quotient, really helps you focus on the strengths and the highest possible impact and potential in your career. However, it's equally important to know your limits, especially because a lot of the limits or weaknesses, as you call them in an interview question, are actually the gateway to your greatest strengths. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, when you are aware of your limits and you've accepted them as much as you have accepted your strengths because you know how they interact with each other, it makes constructive feedback that you get much less personal because it's not new information. It's something you already know about yourself. And while most people skip the step of discovering their limits and really finding a way to embrace them, it's also why they take things at work so personally, especially when it comes to obstacles, drama, or feedback. They internalize that negative input because you know deep down at a subconscious level that it's hitting on something that you haven't accepted about yourself. Like, you know you have that issue, but you're pretending not to know about it. And here's the real gotcha with our limits. Most typically, they are the exact reasons why our strengths are our strengths. And we need to embrace our limits just as much as we embrace our greatest areas of potential. I'll give you a personal example just to illustrate this and make it hopefully make a little bit more sense. You might have noticed this about me. My attention to detail sucks. It's why I make so many typos. This is not a good thing. And I have people messaging me on the regular to tell me that it's making me look unprofessional. However, if I was a detailed person, there is zero way that I would be able to consider multiple ideologies and social theories, as well as multiple individual personalities, to mentor my clients on their career strategy and help them navigate workplace issues. That requires a big picture thinker who's able to slice and dice information together. You can't do that from 3 feet. You need to be 350,000 feet in the air to do that. So when I make a typo, I don't beat myself up about it. I mean, I try to make as few as possible, and I installed Grammarly onto my computer. That helps, but really my typing is that bad that it doesn't really do the job totally. But if I focused so much on becoming a detail person, I would miss the ability to do the thing that I'm truly great at. So the typos are part of my brand, and if that bothers you, I'm not the person for you. When you are self-aware and you know your strengths and limits, you begin to accept yourself for exactly who you are. We're not perfect beings, we're not striving to be. And when we settle into all of our potential and the areas that we have less potential, our confidence will naturally grow. And that, my friends, is the real key on how to not take things personally at work and to be confident AF in yourself and in your career success journey. If you are someone who has been struggling with confidence at work, there's not an overnight solution. Your UAQ is not going to be a silver bullet. However, it is going to start you on that journey. That said, I know sometimes, and in some situations, we really need to have instant confidence, because especially when it comes to accepting feedback or maybe even navigating conflict at work, confidence counts. The confidence you have in yourself is contagious after all. If you know that you can use a couple of boosters from time to time, I want you to go and check out this video right now where I share my top instant confidence boosters. But before you go, if this video helped you take things less personally at work, give it a thumbs up. It really helps my channel and it makes you my favorite career bestie. If you want more videos like this, consider subscribing for the best career success advice on the internet, and I will see you in the next video. As always, thank you so much for watching, my friend. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.